Hi everyone, welcome to the Racist War. We're back after a short break, thanks to myself relocating houses. Absolute pain in the ass. We did do a short Race That Decides for you, if you wanted to listen to that. That's all about the Tasmanian election. People are asking me why it's not on YouTube. YouTube locked me out of my account. Don't know why. Probably a sign of things to come, as in a
Thank
ban.
you, YouTube.
Yeah. So anyway, we are back with the Racist War after a couple of weeks off, and yeah, we're going to go through some old stuff, but mainly new. We won't cover everything that we have missed. So anyway, Feeney and Nolsey are with you, and we're going to start off today's episode with a discussion on religious discrimination. So, about 2 weeks ago, I believe, we had a report handed down by the Australian Law Reform Commission. Now, this was set up by our Attorney General, Mark Dreyfus, to investigate and recommend changes to our existing acts relating to religious schools and institutions and how they hire and fire people and enroll students and things like that. So, safe to say, the Australian Law Reform Commission, the ALRC, is a deep state bureaucracy, like most are. It is stacked with people who have an agenda, and that agenda seems to always point one way. So when you read the recommendations here, it's not surprising that we get what we get. So basically, what this is about, it's about two things. Well, actually, they've kind of made it about three now. Three separate acts, that is. So the first one is the Sex Discrimination Act. Now, there is a section in the Sex Discrimination Act that permits religious institutions to discriminate on the basis of sexuality, gender, and even marital status. They're allowed to do so and allowed to discriminate on those bases so long as, if it were to cause injury to that institution's religious beliefs. So an obvious one would be, say, perhaps hiring a gay teacher or hiring an atheist teacher or someone who is not of that particular denomination of the school. That seems pretty fair enough to me. I would not be welcome if I tried to get a job there, but I would completely understand that. And also on that basis of the fact that, like, I'm not a religious person, that would also motivate me to not want to work there in the first place.
You'd think that, wouldn't you?
Yeah, and you'd think that about LGBT activists generally, but yet they want to fight for that right to work at a religious school.
Well, again, that it's their entire conception of the world is like it has to be in totally theirs and accessible to them, or otherwise that institution that doesn't allow them access is an anathema.
Yeah, it's that. It is definitely that, but I think there's a more insidious motivation, which is they simply want to subvert those institutions.
Yes.
You know, it's they are actually motivated to work there because of the very purpose of destroying their religious ethos. Like, if it's a Catholic school, for example, making it less of a Catholic school. I think that's what they want to do. They want to actually intrude on, what should be a safe space, a real safe space, a proper one. And they want to take it away. They want to get rid of it. That's what I think it's about. Anyway,
it is.
So that... sorry, go on.
No, it is. Basically, like, if you want to destroy a religious institution, you just make them dull their practices until they're basically non-existent. And then what's the point of it being a religious institution?
Right, and then they achieve their goal. And then they'll move on to some other nutty thing after that. So, anyway, the report that was handed down by the ALRC said that that section of the Sex Discrimination Act should be scrapped entirely. And this is exactly what the LGBT lobby and the Greens and other such creatures have been advocating as well, is just the wholesale removal of that section of the Act.
Yeah.
Now, the other aspect, of course, is drawing up a separate act, a new one, called the Religious Discrimination Act, much like we have a Sex Discrimination Act. And that is designed to protect religious beliefs. Now, on that, though, they want to include clauses in it that make it not okay to, say, discriminate on sexuality or marital status or things like that. But they have said, believe it or not, that a new section should be inserted into the Fair Work Act. And this is why I said this now involves 3 pieces of legislation. So, Sex Discrimination Act, a new Religious Discrimination Act, and the existing Fair Work Act. And they want that new section to, what was it here? Oh, yeah. Allowing a carve-out to religious schools to discriminate on the basis of religious belief. So they can't include those other factors that I just said, like marital status, sexuality, gender identity, things like that. However, they can say, you've got to be a Catholic to work at a Catholic school.
What about a gay Catholic?
So you could be gay or trans or, single and, say, fornicating and breaking every rule that Catholics hold dear. But so long as you just identify as a Catholic and say, who are you to tell me that I'm not a real Catholic?
Here we go. Got a new term, a CINO. Yeah. A Catholic in name only.
Yeah. Oh, there's already plenty of those. Joe Biden would count as one of those, I'm sure.
Basically every Italian.
So basically, that just makes that redundant. I mean, the whole idea of hiring people, and yes, that means discriminating among them to make sure that they are of your religious persuasion, is all but diminished. I mean, if all they have to do is just say, well, yes, I am a Catholic, I am a Pentecostal, whatever it is, and then they get in, that is an extremely weak way of actually preserving the religious identity of that institution. I mean, how can you when the people running it do not adhere to its core values? So, but, that is the goal of the cultural left. I mean, that's exactly what they want to do here. So, naturally, the Greens' Adam Bant jumped on this straight away, and he said that he wants the Law Reform Commission's recommendations to be implemented immediately in full. Now, when it comes to the Labor Party's reaction to this, it's been pretty underhanded, let's say.
Yeah.
So, Albo has said that, this is what he originally said, that he only wants to move forward with religious discrimination reform so long as there is bipartisan support, that is, support from the coalition. Now, when it comes to draft legislation, however, he has shown them nothing. He simply said that Peter Dutton and Michaelia Cash, because she is the shadow Attorney General, had simply been briefed on the recommendations of the ALRC and what Labor wants to do with them. They have not, however, provided draft legislation. They certainly haven't set up an inquiry or any form of parliamentary debate. So, in other words, there's been no
action so far.
There's been no transparency with it. So, it's a bit much to say, well, we demand bipartisan support, but we're not going to show you the detail, And of course, Michaelia Cash and Peter Dutton have gone and said the exact same thing. So after that, what does Labor say then? Rather than actually saying, okay, well, we will draft the legislation, we will show it to you, they've said, no, you know what? We can do a deal with the Greens instead. The Greens and the Tea.
Oh, boy.
So that means that, yes, they could pass it And that, of course, the Greens said that they're willing to go ahead with a Religious Discrimination Act, so long as they have all of those protections, as they call them, for gay and trans and non-religious and everything for both teachers and students.
Yeah.
So,
which, by the way, that means you're getting the tranny bathroom, you're getting the rape case in the near future.
Yeah, you are. Well, you're essentially, even though the whole purpose of Religious Discrimination Act is to protect religious belief and its practice, it will have the absolute opposite effect, because you will have clauses in it making exceptions, saying you cannot discriminate on this, and this grounds. And at the same time, you're going to have that section removed from the Sex Discrimination Act that has, up until now anyway, permitted religious institutions to discriminate. So, they're actually going to be...
I was going to say, if you want a vision of the future... I was going to say, if you want a vision of the future, just go and Google trans activist teacher found with 1 billion terabytes of child porn or child CSAM.
Right. There's no shortage of stories like that. Or say 2 dads, quote unquote, who have basically sold their children into sex slavery. Happens all the time.
One case just happened recently. There was a dude who was a gay activist, got basically caught with a child. Like basically, they said it was child abuse because he was like plotting to have his this son that they're getting because he's like a gay couple. This son they were getting through IVF, and they're like saying like, oh, how are they going to fucking dole this kid out to get raped?
Yeah, well, look, I think it goes without saying that we would go even further with these laws. I would make it so that if you're a homosexual, you would be ineligible for a working with children's check. You just could not get that card, and therefore you could not work with children. That would be in the Fenienreich. That is how I would run it. So I would like to push back against this stuff a hell of a lot more. But yeah, the way it stands right now is looking like, because Labor don't want to show their hand here, they'd much rather just do this dirty deal with the Greens instead. So yeah, if I'm going to bet one way or another, I think that's what they're going to do.
Yeah, probably. It'll be the end of religious schools. It'll be the end of basically any fucking religious institution. So.
Right. Well, look, and as we can imagine here, when that report came out from the Law Reform Commission, you had an open letter that was signed by a coalition of Christian, Islamic, and Jewish leaders. And they said in the letter that if they were to implement those recommendations, it would extinguish their distinct and authentic character and render them indistinguishable from public schools. Yes, absolutely. Of course it would.
Yep.
And
there'll be no point for them being fucking religious. Simple.
Not just that, but you open up children to a further threat of sexual abuse, I would argue, because you would end up with more homosexual teachers. And that's just the way it works. Homosexual teachers tend to be predatory teachers.
Yeah.
So, but here's one that I found funny, though. Now, this was sort of pointed out as like a way of, I guess, justifying what the Law Reform Commission has said, because something that was leaked to the Australian was like a clause that was drawn up by a private school. So this was the Glasshouse Christian College. It's a Baptist school in Queensland. And these were clauses. They're not binding, of course, because it's like not legal to do all of this yet. But it's said to be like kind of in preparation for a Religious Discrimination Act in the future. What would they actually do? What clauses would they adopt? So they put in a number of lifestyle clauses. So that meant if you were a teacher, teaching at the school, you could actually be disciplined or even lose your job if you were getting drunk, having sex outside of marriage, homosexual, or get a divorce. Now, all right, maybe the getting drunk one, that's a little harsh. I don't know. But that doesn't necessarily mean you get fired. Like, you'll just get, be disciplined. You've been given warnings and stuff like that. But
you shouldn't be getting completely shit hammered every night if you're a teacher.
Yeah, look, I mean, that should be an issue for any employer. If you've got an employee that's an alcoholic, that's obviously an issue. And yeah, most people would agree it's okay to, say, discriminate on those grounds.
It'll make me unemployable. Goddamn.
Yeah, but I mean, but those things those points I just went through, those lifestyle clauses, I mean, all of those things obviously relate to the Christian ethos and the values that they want to promote and instill in the students. So you have to have the staff there actually embodying those values. Otherwise, there's no point to them. They'll just be written on paper, but they won't actually be advocated. So yeah, when I read this, I was like, yeah, so what? Good on them. If that's what they want to do, let them do it. I don't see any problem with it. Okay.
Well, there's going to be a fucking problem.
Well, let's turn to our favorite topic, immigration. Now, I'm sorry, guys. I know that there's an update on this story about the emergency immigration laws getting blocked in the Senate. All I know is they were blocked in the Senate, and it was the Greens and the Coalition who blocked them. My understanding is that, like I was saying with the draft legislation of the Sex Discrimination Act, there just wasn't enough transparency with it. It was introduced into the House yesterday, I think. So it shot through, went to the Senate, but then it got blocked there. And the Greens and the Coalition are demanding a Senate inquiry. So I've really jumped ahead of my prep here, but I'm going to keep talking about that issue, considering I am. So,
did we actually get a write-up on what those new laws would be?
Not entirely. Yes, I mean, well,
yeah.
Hold on, I did. Let me just go. This is
the ABC had a pissy fit about them, and I knew that there had to be little to no information on this because they were just fucking babbling.
Oh, hold on, I found the link. Look at that. That was actually the very last story in under immigration that I had written down. But anyway, let's do this in reverse order. So, last minute immigration bill. It's been called. It's been called extraordinary as well in terms of the powers that it gives the minister. So look, the reason why they've got this is because there is another High Court case pending, or going on right now, that could see more immigrants freed, much like the 149 that were freed when indefinite detention was ruled to be illegal. So it's this time the government wants to get in ahead of the High Court and make sure they've got something in place before that decision is made. I'm not actually sure in the detail of that. I wasn't able to find that. We'll definitely update you if we can. Okay, so what do these laws or proposed laws include? So, forcing immigration detainees to apply to go home. So the first part of the bill relates to those who are currently in Australia but have exhausted their avenues to stay in Australia. That includes people currently in immigration detention, but also those in the community on bridging visas who have no prospect of moving on to a different visa in order to remain. So the government could direct those people to comply with orders for them to voluntarily leave the country. And that could include things like applying for a passport of their country of origin, forcing them to actually make that application. Under current laws, you can't do that. You can't force someone to make an application. But under these proposed laws, you could.
Good.
So refusing to process visa applications from certain countries. So this is where you've got, say, one country that is refusing to accept people who are former citizens. So you can imagine that Rohingya guy who was a child rapist. Myanmar are refusing to take him back in, which is understandable. But then again, us here in Australia, we say, well, we don't want him. And so long as you refuse, Yeah, and so long as you refuse to take him back in, we're going to impose a travel ban on your country, meaning that no one from Myanmar, no Burmese, would be allowed to travel to Australia. Now that is pretty harsh. I'll say that.
That's good. That's good.
It's a good
one. I know. Like, you don't want your fucking child predator back, all right? But like, we don't want him either. Like, fucking take this off or no fucking trips to Bondi, fucker.
Yeah, I mean, look, this really surprised me. The fact that Labor under Andrew Giles was actually wanting to have something that strong in his repertoire to be able to use. That was, I got to say, that was surprising. Forcing someone to make an application for a passport is not really that tough, but that sure is.
We are going to fuck with an entire country unless you fucking take your criminal back.
Yeah. So, I mean, I guess, like, what's going on here is I think the overall message that our immigration rate is too high in Australia is resonating with a lot of people. And I don't even necessarily mean white people, by the way, because considering the cost of living prices that we've got right now, everyone is associating high levels of immigration with a bad economy. That is, prices going up. Even if most of us are in a job, everything is so fucking expensive. And people are making that association between high prices and immigration. And I think, we've often said that, like, the coalition throws in the red herring of illegal immigration, of boat people, and talking about being really, really tough on all that. And so people vote for the Liberal Party or vote for the National Party with the mistaken belief that they are tough on immigration. Just because they're tough on, say, one little aspect of it that ultimately bears nothing at all on our net immigration rate. Nonetheless, they think, oh, well, look, this is the base party. They're the ones actually controlling the border. No, they're not. And I think what's happening here with Andrew Giles and Labor is that they're trying to steal that from the coalition. Again, they're trying to say, no, we're actually really tough on immigration. Look at these, like, harsh laws that we're ramming through. Even though those laws would likely apply to, about 100 people or something? 100, 150 people? Considering the last High Court decision covered 149 people, I would be expecting that this would be a similar number. And what is that? What is 150 people in the ocean of immigration that we're swamped with all the time? It is nothing. It's a droplet. It's bugger all.
It's not even a fucking 0.1%.
Yeah. It is absolutely nothing. It makes no difference. And unfortunately, though, that's the phony immigration debate that we have. And Labor, I don't know if they're going to be successful in this, but they're trying to put that message out there that, yes, we're getting immigration under control, and therefore we're getting your rent prices and your house prices and everything under control as well. Okay, so anyway,
by the way.
Of course not. Well, look, we got stories on that now. So, so remember this: the government did make a pledge last year, I think in November, to half Australia's net immigration intake in 2 years' time. Okay, so that would mean you'd have to reduce it by 25% for this year, and then 50% the year after. So we got some figures out here that are showing the opposite. So in the last 3 months, it looks like we actually got in net immigration of 150,000 people. Okay. Now, where was it for the month? Oh, yeah.
Record breaking.
Yes, it is. Now, here's another record breaking. Here's another one that's broken as well. For the month of January of this year, 2024, you had 125,410 permanent and long-term arrivals. But then when you account for the departures, in other words, net immigration, the month of January had a net increase of 55,330. Another record. We have never, ever had a month with net immigration being that high. And just to pull out my calculator, if that intake were to be sustained for 12 months of the year, that would be 663,960 people. Again, a new record. The last financial year, the numbers differ, but I'd say it's around 600,000 or so, as high as 640,000. So that would be yet another record breaker. So if Labor is struggling to sell the idea that they are actually getting net immigration under control, well, the numbers simply aren't showing it. So it shouldn't be surprising that people don't believe them. It's also hard to believe them when you're still paying through the nose of petrol and everything every day.
Well, then again, it's hard for people not to believe them because normally the source of a lack of belief in something that they can see with their own eyes, and every mega totalitarian, I don't like Stalin, I don't like Hitler novel has gone over this, but it's propaganda. And what was the fucking message being put out by the fucking say the left side or the pro-immigration side of this argument? It was oh no, the actual really easy to fucking link together material relation between flooding a market with demand and having a small amount of supply. No, that's not it. It's actually a conglomeration of property developers going against literally they're just blatantly saying that they're going against their profit motive to hold the sale of houses so they can get them at a higher price. It's no, that's not how that fucking works. They want the fucking money now.
Well, yeah. I was
They're
going to
all
get to this
fucking
later.
starving.
Chris Minns, the Premier of New South Wales, was saying that we need new immigrants to build new houses. You get that? So immigrants come here, they cause the housing prices in the first place, considering that the number of houses built is not keeping up to net intakes. But at the same time, Chris Minns says we should import even more of them to build houses for them. Now,
you ever heard of the rocket paradox?
Ever heard of chasing your tail?
Yeah. Okay, let's fucking indulge in more of the fucking problem because maybe, and this is absolutely not going to be the fucking case. And by the way, would you really want your house being built by a bunch of fucking street shitters? That's a question for everyone.
Oh well, yeah, there's that. Yeah, there's so many other issues that
there's
too.
There's a whole bunch of fucking little sticky things to unpack here, but my god, how the fuck can you look yourself in the fucking mirror and not see a fool when you say a statement like that?
Right. Okay. All right. Now let's, in the tradition of fairness, let's go through what the government has actually proposed here. Claire O'Neill, who's the Home Affairs Minister, says that, look, okay, fine, the quarterly net increase and the month of January don't look good. Of course, there's not a trend of decreasing immigration. In fact, it's quite the opposite. But she said, look, there's a lag effect. You got to wait for some of these policies to flow through in the system and have their effect felt. Okay, so what are they? So they are going to be increasing English language requirements for a number of visas. So, for example, there's one where you have to have an overall score of 5.5. That's going to be increased to 6. And then there's another one where it's 6 and it's going to be increased to 6.5. So they're going to, increase it by a standard deviation or whatever. That will lock some people out. Okay, that's good. Also, by the way, there was a 24% reduction in the approval of student visas. We covered this, I think, on the last show. But as I said at the time, that's one visa where you've showed that. What about all the other visas where the net intake is just going up all the time? Well, the figures we just read through, I think, show that made very little difference. Okay, now the other one. Now, this actually runs contrary to prior reports about what the government was going to do here. Relating to student visas again, the genuine temporary entrant requirement is actually going to be strengthened. There were reports a couple of months ago that the government was considering scrapping it altogether, meaning that you didn't have to prove that you were only coming to Australia for the purpose of study. But now the government is saying no, they're actually going to strengthen it. And on top of that, they've also removed the COVID concessions that existed previously. So, for example, there was a cap, I think, of 20 hours per week of working time that someone on a student visa could do. Under COVID, that was increased to 40 hours. I think that's what it was. Labor has reversed those concessions. But it's like, okay, but you're talking about like measures that were implemented in a pandemic, in a 1 in 100 year type situation. And all you did was just go back to the way it was before. That's not exactly a big reform, is it? You're not even really changing anything. You're just reverting to what it was. So anyway, that's really all we've got here. We've got some marginal increase in the English language requirements, and it's a little bit harder now to prove that you're a genuine temporary entrant. That's it.
The most inbred, the most inbred of untouchables, greatest affected.
Yeah. Oh, and we reverse the concessions. Now, how are those three things alone going to decrease net immigration by 25% this year? It absolutely won't. I doubt it'll even slow the rate of acceleration of growth.
No.
It'll mean bugger all. Okay, so someone who seized on the January figures was Dick Smith, that great
fucking
Australian businessman and patriot. So yeah, look, he said that. I mean, look, he only ever talks about this in terms of economics and everything. And one thing I do like about Dick Smith is that he's against the further urbanization of Australia, just packing all of us into apartments. I do like that part about him. But yeah, he I forget the show that he was on, but he actually said that the sustainable numbers for Australia would be 75,000 people a year net. And yeah, I'd just simply add that caveat though, Mr. Smith. They've all got to be white. Okay, and you won't bring yourself to say that, will you?
No, you won't.
That number, and you couldn't care less if it was 75,000 per Jeeps.
Yeah, no, Dick Smith is one of those perfect cases, one of Plato's form cases of why lead poisoning will fucking absolutely make you kind of retarded, because he spent his early life installing car radios at garages. Well, apparently, I don't know if that's just one of those fake billionaire stories to make you feel a little bit of sympathy for him. But I think those solar fumes eventually got to him, man.
Okay, I really don't know much about the guy. So he's one of the rags to riches stories, is he?
He probably fucking isn't, but in his autobiography, he talks about starting out installing car radios.
Okay then. Okay, so let's get to some other. I do remember the. Do you remember the Dick Smith branded food and other products he had instead of Tim Tams he had Temptins, and instead of Redheads matches he had Dickheads matches. Do you remember that?
I still remember a photo of Dickheads matches going around. Yeah.
Yeah,
and it's fucking. What was his? Yeah, what was his fucking What was his version of Vegemite that actually tasted like dog shit?
I don't know. I don't think I ever tried a Dick Smith product. Honestly, I don't think
it was fucking terrible. It tasted worse than fucking Cheesy Mite.
Oh, is that the new Vegemite with they originally called it Ice Snack 2.0, something ridiculous?
Ozmite, Dick Smith's Ozmite. It was absolutely fucking putrid.
Yeah, don't think I ever tried it. I still like my Vegemite. Now, okay, so we still got a little bit on immigration. Some other stories here. So, oh yeah, so something else Labor's been under attack for during question time. There's been some fiery question times lately. Is the removal of the ankle bracelets from the 149 free detainees who were being held in indefinite detention. So we covered a few weeks back that Labor basically dropped this because there was a pending human rights case at the High Court, and it looked like it was probably going to be successful as well. Because we do have to remember that not all of the 149 were criminals. Some of them, there was other reasons why they couldn't return home, like political persecution and whatnot. But nonetheless, when they imposed the ankle bracelets, they just made it for all of them. So they were going to make the argument that that violated the human rights of others, based on collective punishment of just everyone who was released. So Labor kind of saw the writing on the wall. They knew that that was going to be successful.
Yeah.
So they removed it. And what they've done since then was handball that responsibility over to a government bureaucracy. So the Department of Home Affairs or Immigration under Andrew Giles or Claire O'Neill no longer have that responsibility. They have shifted that to the Community Protection Board, which was actually something that they established in December. So they make an independent assessment of those detainees released into the public and decide whether or not they have the ankle bracelet or not. I don't see a huge issue with that, so long as the process doesn't take too long, because there were like murderers and rapists among those 149. And unfortunately, with those government bureaucracies, that is what it means. It's all this red tape, and it takes ages while they're roaming the streets.
What about the fucking human rights of the people that they, one, have, and two, will fucking victimize?
Yeah, they have. They have. Including sex offences, by the way. That,
yes.
Like,
some real fucking heinous shit. Some real fucking heinous shit against fucking elderly women.
Okay, now, we might have also heard about some Palestinian, technically not refugees, because they were on Visitor 600 visas. They were not on humanitarian visas. Nonetheless, a number of them were granted to people fleeing Gaza. And it's actually around 2,200. But you know what the figure is for Israelis handed the same visa in the same time frame? 2,400. 2,000. There's more. We actually gave more to Jews. Why? Is Israel being leveled at the moment? No, Gaza is. Yet you let in more Israelis than Palestinians. Anyway, I've harped on that about that before. But look, what happened was you had this interesting fiasco where a number of those Palestinian visa holders were literally on a flight to Australia, and then their visas got cancelled while they were in the air. Now, we still don't have like a real explanation as to what exactly happened here. As far as I know, most of those Palestinians have had those visas reinstated. The ones, I mean, when they landed here, they had to go to immigration detention, because that's what it is. They landed here as, illegals, even though it wasn't really their fault. So Andrew Giles has put this down to a system error. He's saying that he doesn't know really why that happened. And
someone had to pull the trigger.
Yeah, look, I'm wondering, like, given the fact, like I just mentioned, that more Jews have been granted these visas than Palestinians have, even though their country is not being leveled as we speak, I'd like to know who's been whispering in Andrew Giles's ear. And we've got another story coming up. We've got a beauty on the different treatment that Australia's Jewish community gets in comparison to Australia's Muslim community. But yeah, call me a conspiracy kook or whatever, but I can't help but think there was a J element involved in all of this, considering that they've already been lobbying the government hard. I mean, just go have a look at Australian Jewish News if you want to read the articles on it. talking about how Australia is potentially importing Hamas fighters and that we shouldn't be letting them in. They want them to go to Europe instead, I think.
Well, that was the entire point of like the U.S. military project to set a port up there. Where the fuck do you think they're actually getting dropped off? They're going to get distributed until they're a thin film that is completely and utterly incapable of organizing and doing something in revenge for what happened to their homeland. And neutralized.
All right, moving on to climate and energy. So there's been a lot of debate in the past couple of weeks about, I think the two big ones were nuclear power and fuel efficiency standards. Now, you might need to correct me on this, Nolsey, but I'm pretty sure I just wanted to explain like what my understanding of fuel efficiency standards are, because there seems to be a lot of confusion about it. The way I see it is it basically works like the emissions trading scheme works, where, you know, under those schemes, you have polluters or emitters who can only emit a certain amount of CO2. And then once they've reached that limit, they can't exceed it unless they go and buy carbon credits from another company who has not yet exceeded their limit. So they've actually got some left over, and you can buy those from them. Fuel efficiency standards actually work in a very similar way, in that like there's a limit on how many fuel inefficient cars you can manufacture. However, when you reach that limit, you can make more if you go and buy those credits from another car manufacturer who has not yet reached their peak on dirty cars, on cars that pollute too much. Have I got that just about right, the way it works?
Yeah, there's been a whole bunch of scandals because like these things go back as far as the fucking 80s, basically, where like, you know, they do shit like reclassify the car as another type of car by basically making it fucking retarded. There was the there was a Korean company and they sold a car to America and it was like, oh, we're not. This is a van. This isn't a pickup. This is a van. And then it turns out, like, if you take 4 bolts off the fucking thing, it turns into a pickup.
Right.
Yeah, there's a whole bunch of shit like that. And yeah, there's basically been like there was an instance between Toyota, Suzuki, and Nissan where they were basically they built like one would be like, oh look, I want to make more SUVs this year and sell them to whatever country. Can I make a deal and you make more hatchbacks or something like that? Because yeah, like my engines are fucking blowing out too much emissions. So can I take some of your ability to produce those things? So yeah, works pretty similar, just a little bit more industry specific.
Right. And that's also like, you can see it's a very convoluted way of basically making the manufacturing of those vehicles more expensive. And so that has led Peter Dutton, for example, to say that the proposed fuel efficiency standards make a car tax. And good old ABC and their fact check focused on this question. And here was their conclusion. No, Labor is not taxing the family car. Now, if you want to go through their reasoning for it, basically they just explain how the fuel efficiency standards work as how we just explained them. And they say, well, because of the fact that there isn't a direct tax, say, on fuel inefficient cars, well, that means no, it's not a tax. It's like, okay, well, very technically, you're right, I guess. You know, it doesn't meet the textbook definition of what a tax is. However, like, when we talk about a tax, people just want to know, are we going to have to be paying more money? That's the
answer question. Is yes.
Yeah, and the answer is absolutely yes.
It always is fucking yes.
When it comes to purchasing cars, are going to pay more. That's undoubted, because it is going to make the manufacturing costs for car companies more expensive. And as they always do, they'll then pass those expenses on to the consumer. That's what always happens. That's the way markets work. So
look, strip the government, you know, bureaucracy or regulations aside. Like, if you're purchasing a car without those, you're purchasing the fucking materials, construction and sometimes brand name of that car. Everything else added onto it, the logistics, etc., caused by regulations, is also going to be another cost added to it. The only question is it worthwhile? In the vast majority of cases, it's not.
No, and obviously the purpose here is simply to reduce the CO2 emissions. And, and while they're doing this, of course, they're subsidizing electric vehicles, and they're funding the rollout of more of these charging stations and stuff like that.
Which, to this day, years later, are still, like, when I see one, they're, the vast majority of the time, they're almost nearly completely empty or empty. Yeah, unless you go to, like, a really posh neighborhood, in which that's basically the exception to the rule there.
That's true, yes. So look, some temporary relief, though. Chris Bowen has said that the fuel efficiency standards that they're planning to introduce this year are not going to be quite as stringent as previously announced. And that's actually because Joe Biden has announced the same thing. Now, apparently this has come from pressure from car manufacturers, mainly on America, not on Australia. But because America are the ones sort of leading the way when it comes to these new standards, Australia is merely following. So it doesn't make much sense, especially as a small emitter, small polluter, for us to actually exceed the standards of America. So thankfully, they're not going to be quite as draconian as what we once thought. However, the whole purpose also of fuel efficiency standards is that it's a long-term program, and it means that the restrictions on manufacturing high-polluting vehicles become more stringent over time. Basically, the idea is you get to some point where everyone is simply producing an electric vehicle. You know, like they're just the norm. They're just like all Toyota and Ford produce. You know,
look, I don't think that
anyway.
Like again, I said this last time, like not fucking happening. And the only thing that actually has promise, which is actually concerning to me in regards to getting rid of internal combustion engine cars, is they're like rolling out fucking hydrogen fuel cell cars. There's ones that are commercially available in South Korea right now. But the problem is, like, no matter what you do with a hydrogen fuel cell car, no matter if like you store the hydrogen in a metal hydroxide substrate, which makes it a little bit safer, you're still talking about the crash survivability of a fucking Pinto.
Right. Yeah, well, I mean, look, especially given that we're living in a cost of living crisis at the moment, I mean, the term is very apt. Labor is still screwing with the economy in all these ways that just, you know, are just going to perpetuate this cycle. Okay, now we rant a bit about the green energy infrastructure and how that is imposed upon people in the bush. And of course, people in the urban centres who support it don't have to deal with the consequences of, you know, the massive wind turbines and all that kind of stuff. So the government is getting impatient in terms of the rollout and the construction of this infrastructure. One of the reasons why is simply because, well, we don't have enough power in the grid. We're not offsetting our coal reduction with more gas supply. Instead, we're just trying to get out more green energy and produce to make up for the what we've lost through coal. But we're not doing that. There's fewer and fewer supplies of electricity in the grid all the time, which is why we're leading to things like brownouts and blackouts. So the government's answer to this is, no, let's not, say, dedicate more gas to that venture. Instead, let's actually speed up the consultation process when it comes to constructing these green energy monstrosities out in the bush. So the way the government is selling it is that currently there's $90 billion worth of development in those areas, and they're saying that they're being held up by the arduous consultation process and the red tape. You know, they're sounding a lot like the Liberal Party here. Let's cut through the red tape. What this actually means is that they are not consulting with the community members, with the farmers, with the property owners who actually live out in these rural areas. They want to fast track it and just build it without their approval and without taking anything into consideration. Who needs to listen to the old rednecks out in the bush?
Well, that's the thing. They're very easy to step on. They're very fucking easy to step on.
Unfortunately. And I mean, the one party that's supposed to represent them, the Nationals, instead just represents big agribusiness nowadays instead of people who actually live in the bush. So no one is advocating for them. Okay, now, small white pill here. The Australian Energy Regulator, they're saying that the so-called default market offer will fall slightly for some customers. Now, to translate that into English, this is just like a power tariff, an electricity tariff. They're recommending that it be reduced, that a tax be reduced, a cost be reduced, and therefore that cost would flow on to consumers. Now, don't get your hopes up, though. This apparently would only make a difference in terms of the rate of increasing power prices. It would not actually reverse them. Certainly would not result in a decrease of power prices. Nonetheless, you might just have a small slowdown in the rate in which your power bill is going up. So there you go. Tiny little white pill for you that you probably won't even notice. Okay, so the Shadow Climate and Energy Minister, you may not have heard of him. His name is Ted O'Brien. He's somewhat getting a higher profile now because, of course, he's advocating for nuclear power. So there was an absolute horrendous interview with this guy on 7:30 about 2 weeks ago. Why have Sabra Lane, I think, is the host of the show. I hope I'm getting that right, that English woman. Anyway, she just interrupted him the whole time when it came to when he was talking about, say, the timeline and the cost involved in building nuclear reactors. I encourage anyone, if you just want to see some really shoddy, biased journalism, go watch that interview.
Oh, yeah.
It was unreal. But anyway, Chris Bowen says that in America, apparently the average length of time to construct a nuclear reactor is 19 years.
No.
No, I know. Yeah, I know. It can't be that much. Now, Ted O'Brien has been saying that, well, look, for starters, that was how long it took to America to make them like decades ago. Because you know that pretty much all of the nuclear reactors they have in America are from the 70s or sometimes even before then.
Yeah.
People forget this. And the reason why is because the anti-nuclear lobby has actually been very successful in America. People forget that because of the simple fact that they have nuclear power and the Simpsons, I guess, evil Mr. Burns. But no, like there has been a hell of a lot of nuclear projects in America that just never saw the light of day because of the success of the anti-nuclear lobby.
Yeah, just for quick numbers, in 1950, it was about 10 years. Since the 70s, it's been 8.1 years, and in recent constructions that have noted basically blowouts and costs and etc. was 8.8 years. But most modern projects take 6 years, or for smaller reactors, 3 to 5 years.
Yeah, I was going to say the figures that Ted O'Brien had, and this was to do with research that was commissioned by the Liberal Party, was that a small-scale reactor, and that's, by the way, how they would be starting in Australia. They would start with a number of small nuclear reactors. The time frame they estimated was 3 to 6 years.
Yeah.
So yeah.
I'm seeing the same numbers on the ABC, and I'm seeing the same numbers from they're pro-nuclear. Well, the smaller numbers from a pro-nuclear called sustainability by the numbers. They're pretty much showing the same thing.
Yeah. So these were the kind of points that Ted O'Brien was trying to put out on the 7:30 report. and he just kept getting stepped on the whole time. But yeah, this isn't stopping Chris Bowen and that out there still peddling these numbers, and at the same time, not only saying, "Oh, it's going to take 19 years," but also saying that it's going to increase power prices for everyone. Well, look, a large-scale nuclear reactor, yeah, that might take like around 8 years or so, and it is expensive to build. But when it comes to the generation of power, that's actually when your power prices start to fall. The generation of power is a lot more cost-effective.
Yes,
that's the part that Chris Bowen never talks about.
It is an upfront cost, but like there's other solutions. We've talked about this, converting our current coal fire stations and just using their turbine module while just building a reactor housing. Again, the introduction of smaller scale ones before we do larger scale ones. And by the way, people who fucking buy power from the smaller scale ones will probably be the biggest advocates for the construction of the larger scale ones.
Right. I mean, they obviously just want to start off small as like kind of a test run. But I mean, the other retort I just make there was we just spoke about how they're trying to rush the construction of these green energy projects in the bush. I mean, for how many years have we been dicking around with projects like that and, snowy hydro and all that kind of thing? How long do those projects take? They take a good few years as well, and they cost a hell of a lot of money too, multi-billion dollars. Like
they are a gigantic, entirely fucking geographically fixed and restricted slab of fucking concrete.
Yeah. So, yeah, I mean, but look, nonetheless, we do still have advocates, though, in let's say, the scientific community. So Kathy Foley is a senior scientist at the CSIRO, and she appeared on Q&A the other night saying that nuclear technology is the most expensive form of energy. So she also backed up Bowen's claims by saying that, yeah, the projects do take too long. So
fucking Christ.
That just makes me, again, I talked about the agenda of the deep state. Dare I say the CSIRO is absolutely stacked with environmental activists. They're not just scientists. They've got a clear political agenda as well.
Oh, God, if only we had a few little birdies in the CSIRO that could tell us about that.
Yeah, well, look, Peter Dutton, credit to him, actually did come out and rebuke the CSIRO over this. He said, in terms of the studies that they're talking about, he said, it's not relied on, it's not a genuine piece of work. And he called their research discredited. Well, I'd say so too. We've gone through some of the other research before that just doesn't show this. Okay. So maybe you take this as a white pill as well, but apparently Australia's scorecard for the environment in 2023 worsened. We're apparently doing better than other countries, for example, America and China. But yeah, our score out of 10 was 7.5, and that's down from 8.7 in 2022. How about that? So that's all under a Labor government as well. Again, maybe just because of those delays in green energy projects. I don't know. But I just laugh whenever I see like that. Sometimes I just wonder, are they just doing that on purpose just to like give the country an extra kick up the arse and say, hey, you need to accelerate all these programs. Look, you're going backwards. It makes me wonder if those numbers are fudged.
Sometimes I look at like organizations like that and like their actions, their approvals, their disapprovals, and I just think like is there like why is this doing this? Are you just like here to browbeat us for something? Honestly, most of the time I feel like all these ratings are completely and utterly disingenuous.
Yeah, they're just simply there as it's a carrot and stick approach.
Yeah,
just saying, yeah, you're not doing good enough. You're an immoral actor on the world stage, and you need to pull your finger out.
Well, the thing is, if any of these like ratings were completely accurate and we're all being measured on the same scale, even if we're all being measured on the trend at which we're moving towards something, China and India should literally like completely and utterly destroy it, like the fucking retard in the gifted class who completely destroys the fucking rating curve.
Right. Oh, so here's one other. I should have put this earlier in the prep, but you had what was basically a joint statement put out by Australia's largest energy companies, including Ausgrid. And they talked about two things in terms of our energy grid. One is that all these green projects are being delayed, as we were just talking about. They just keep hitting snags that haven't been factored into the original timeline. And the second thing is, when it comes to closing coal fire stations that used to actually make up the bulk of our electricity grid, we're not offsetting that enough with gas. I mean, that was the whole idea, was like use the lesser of two evils, which is gas, in terms of fossil fuels, while we're transitioning to green energy, so that we can emit less. Well, they're saying that we haven't even been able to do that. And that's despite the fact that, here in WA for almost 20 years, we've been setting aside 15% of our gas reserves in storage to save for a rainy day. And apparently now that's not even enough. So,
Nope.
yeah. So whenever Chris Bowen goes on about the enormous timeframes and costs involved in nuclear power, well, remember stuff like this. Remember how much green energy costs and how long it takes. Okay, now the recycling tax. So this is a proposal by Tanya Plibersek, of course, who's the Environment Minister. This is to do with combating the amount of recycling that we send overseas. Because when it comes to sending recycling overseas, you know what we're actually doing? We're not recycling it.
Sending it to rotten Malaysia.
Yeah, and like India and stuff. We're sending it where we are just big, completely unmanaged, uncontained landfills. That's what it means. So Plibersek wants to impose this tax where you would be hit with a tax if the recycling that you have, that the company collects, goes offshore, instead of actually, recycling it as it's supposed to be. And I love reminding people, the majority of what you throw into that yellow bin does not get recycled. The vast majority of it does not. It actually just goes to enriching the Pratt family, a wealthy Jewish Australian family, I might add, who are basically the main drivers of the recycling scam in Australia. But nonetheless, we've got this recycling tax, and guess what? A lot of these recyclers, they don't like the idea of it, and they're calling.
Again, we busted Red Cycle. No, if you're in Australia and you see like a chip packet, a can, or something like that, look on it for the little Red Cycle logo. They're still being fucking printed with those things, even after it was busted that they were literally just sending them into fucking like shithole third world countries to be dumped and rotted on.
That's Pratt's company, isn't it?
Yes.
Red Cycle, yeah. No, do that, yeah. Whenever you I don't really eat stuff like that, but yeah, like next time, like check out the back of your bottle or your packet or whatever, and you'll see that on there. And you know what? Throw it in the green bin. Okay, throw it in the green bin, and that money will not go to Richard Pratt in the end. Or any of these bloody companies who just get in on the scam. Recycling is a bloody scam. Okay, let's move on to the Israel-Gaza situation and, of course, its relation to Australia. This was probably my favourite story of the week here. So since October 7, there's obviously been a lot of discussion about social cohesion in Australia. In other words, we're talking about rising racial tensions that inevitably emerge in a multiracial territory, because that's unfortunately all Australia really is anymore, just an economic territory full of hodgepodges of people. And of course are exacerbated when you have some form of ethnic conflict going on, obviously in this case between Israel and Gaza. So the government, in response to this, said that they were not only going to consult with community leaders in, healing these divides, but also issuing a number of grants. In other words, money.
Oh boy!
Right. So they said originally that these grants were basically going to be distributed evenly between Arab and Muslim social cohesion groups and Jewish social cohesion groups. So, just to give you an example of the Islamic ones or the Muslim ones who have applied, you had like Nurul Islam Society, Afghan Australian Noor Association, Arab Council Australia, a Syrian Australian Association. I go through a big long list there. None of those organizations, NGOs, whatever you want to call them, have actually been given a grant yet. They've gotten no money, even though that's kind of their purpose, is to take these grants and promote social harmony and all this kind of thing. Now, I'm not advocating that they get that money, okay? Don't think this is me shilling for Islamic groups and getting more funds. No, that's not what I want.
We're talking about the participation trophy here.
Yeah, well, you're going to see
that you get your cake too.
Yeah, well, look, I'll just go through. There's been two like overtly Islamic groups that have received grants, and that is the Islamophobia Register of Australia. I don't think I even heard of that group before. And also the Australian National Imams Council. They've received, I think, it was about $2 million between them. Now, on top of that, SBS and the AAP, both media companies, obviously, SBS received $2 million and the AAP received $1 million. The Human Rights Commission received $2 million. And that was to run extra anti-racism programs. All of this stuff is supposed to relate to October 7, by the way, and the rising racial tensions. Okay, so what we see there is about $6 million given, about $4 million or so given to, $2 million or so given to these NGOs, and then about $4 million given to media organizations, but they're not kind of one way or the other. They're not representing the Jews or the Muslims, although if you watch SBS, fair to say they represent the Muslims a bit more. That would be fair to say. Okay, now, the ECAJ, the Executive Council of Australian Jewry, do you want to take a guess as to how much grant money they have received since October 7?
Oh, a pretty fucking penny.
They have received $25 million. Now, this apparently...
That's some super yachts there, isn't it? That's a good handful of super yachts.
This grant of $25 million was given to the ECAJ on the proviso of them providing improved community safety measures across Australia, and will be distributed through the National Council for Jewish Community Security. Now, remember how we always talk about these bloody security grants that they get given every few months or so, like Tim Wilson and Goldstein, who's been re-endorsed, by the way. He'll be running in the next election against Zoe Daniel in the seat of Goldstein.
Christ.
He was the MP that was responsible, I think, for around $2 million for a security grant in his electorate alone. Okay? Now the ECAJ have gotten $25 million. So naturally, all of these other Muslim groups and the Greens too, are saying, whoa, what the hell? Why is it that they've gotten this whopping amount of money, yet very little has actually been handed out to these other groups? Now, I don't want any of these groups to get any money. None of them. And by the way, if multiculturalism is such a natural and beautiful thing, why are we forever funding these programs to combat the problems that it causes? There would be no need to fund social cohesion groups if social cohesion naturally stemmed from multiculturalism.
I think I probably could speak for both of us in saying that we do not believe in these payments, period. Not because they think they're going to work or they're necessarily like abjectly antithetical to what would be our goals, but because it's like hospice care. It's just stemming the tide of something that's just going to boil up again. May as well just rip the fucking Band-Aid off and have people bashing each other on the fucking streets, to be honest. Not that I'd advocate for that, not that I think that's actually a good outcome. But that's just what's going to fucking happen. You're only fucking kicking the can down the road a couple more years with this shit.
I got to also point out, that's only the tip of the iceberg. How much money have they had to pour into the police who've had to go to all of these protests that are still going on, like on a weekly basis? You know, I know over East anyway, the pro-Palestine protests are continuing. And not just that, but, you know, like fast food chains going up in flames.
Yeah.
Stuff like that happening. These social cohesion costs are only the tip of the iceberg. But, yeah, as you can expect, look, the Jew is the eternal parasite, all right, in both the private sphere in terms of usury and in the public sphere in terms of just being a complete and utter welfare leech. They always put their hand out and violently lobby governments to give them this money, to shake them down. And, you know, there's a shitload of these Islamic NGOs who lobby the government hard. And even they have only managed to squeeze out about $2 million out of grant money that was promised to them. And it was only two groups who got it. Okay. So we are going to be resuming our funding of UNRWA. So that is the aid agency that provides humanitarian relief to...
God, they're funding Hamas. Oh,
yeah, so the Jewish lobby, again, is not happy about this. They're saying, like, you know, because there's still a probe, an inquiry underway, they're saying that needs to conclude before any decision is made. Even though when you read statements like Colin Rubenstein, for example, he just admitted that they want the permanent cessation of funding to UNRWA. You know, so, you know, when they say, oh, no, we need to wait for the report to conclude, no. What they're really saying is just don't fund them at all. Don't fund them at all. And guess how much money we are going to be giving them immediately? $6 million.
Well, there we go.
I really hope that, like, Penny Wong did that as a troll, but I doubt it. I very much doubt it.
Oh, fuck. Are they going to pull one of those things again where it's like, oh, God, you know, you gave them an anti-Semitic number when that one woman got beaten about, like, the security grant?
Well, I'm saying I hope that was the case, but I doubt it. I very much doubt it.
Yeah.
But yeah, look, America still has not resumed funding, but a number of other Western countries like Finland, I believe, have resumed. So yeah, you know, Australia, I do think, is sort of in the middle. I mean, we're still we lean way too much on Israel's side. But, you know, let's just say that the fervent Zionism of the Australian government has been somewhat tempered by the increase of the Muslim electorate, let's say, you know, who temper the policy decisions of people like Penny Wong and Ed Husic. Now, on that note, apparently Muslim voters are turning away from the Labor government in many electorates. So, yeah, I think it kind of goes without saying that, you know, you find an electorate full of, say, Lebanese Muslims in Western Sydney, that's going to be a pretty stalwart Labor seat. Now, they're apparently, though, turning against them because they think that that Labor is far too much on the American and Israeli side here and essentially pandering to the Australian Jewish lobby at the same time. Now, one of our most senior Muslim politicians, Anne Ali, I forget where she is from originally. She's like some kind of Arab, I believe. And we've also got Ed Husic, who's a Bosnian Muslim as well. But anyway, Anne Ali was confronted very heated exchange by a pro-Palestine activist, and it was all caught on film. And Anna Lee had to basically argue as much as she could that she was on the Palestinian side. But this activist wasn't buying it, no matter what she said.
I wouldn't either.
Yeah. No, same. So it really shows how polarizing things are at the moment. Because on the one hand, you've got the Jewish lobby saying that it's a disgrace that we resume our funding to UNRWA. But then at the same time, you've got Muslim politicians from the Labour Party being berated by Palestinian activists as well for being too pro-Israeli. And yeah, that is not just a division among political lines, but among ethnic lines. And it's becoming more and more heated every day, I believe, no matter how much money you want to give the ECAJ in security grants. The fact is more fuel is being thrown on this fire all the time.
There's no amount of fucking $1 million funded kumbaya and drum circles that's going to fucking solve this issue.
No way. And I'm
going to judge Holden Post and say this issue is basically going to be solved by Condon. One group is going to remain and the other one's going to be gone forever.
Yeah, and look, I mentioned the protests before. They're bound to start getting up into the high numbers again because, the incursion in Rafah in Gaza is only just getting started. We have not seen the worst of that yet. And once that does ramp up, as it inevitably will, we're going to feel the reverberations of that right here in Australia. And these protests are going to intensify. Ethnic tension is going to intensify as well.
Yep.
Okay.
Blood to the fucking flame.
Again, my prep a little out of order here. Just on the resumption of aid to UNRWA. Apparently, the Israeli government has briefed the Australian government on the amount of UNRWA workers who directly participated in the October 7 attacks. Now, it was previously stated that it was 12 employees of UNRWA. Now they're telling Australia that it's 15. And they did that right after the decision to reinstate the funding, which seems a little coincidental to me. But really, you're going to go and give money to this group where 15 of their employees were involved in, raping until a pelvis broke, or whatever the hell it is that they say about it.
The most heinous shit you could possibly fucking imagine. Yeah, sounds about right.
Oh, and finally, Dave Sharma. He's back in Parliament again. So remember, this is the guy who was the member for Wentworth, Malcolm Turnbull's old seat. He was then turfed out by a Teal. He's back in the Senate now instead of the House of Reps because he became the parachuted member who replaced Maurice Payne when she left the Senate. Remember, you don't have a by-election for the Senate. You just get someone appointed. So Dave Sharma, the former ambassador to Israel, the half-Pajit, he used his maiden speech, his second maiden speech, to talk about the increase of anti-Semitism in Australia. So
he used to be serving, sir. He used to be supporting Israel.
Right. So just to read a little snippet from his maiden speech, he said, "Discrimination, vilification, harassment, and intimidation," it almost sounds like a rap, "against the Jewish community in Australia has reached unprecedented levels. I understand that people in Australia feel strongly and differ in their views widely about the rights and wrongs of the current conflict in the Middle East and the terrible human suffering and tragedy that has accompanied it." So he wants to remind you that he still feels for both sides. But yeah, he says ultimately the real victims here are the Jews because of the increase in anti-Semitism. And I don't actually disagree about an increase in anti-Jewish sentiment. I think that there genuinely is that. And when you slaughter around 32,000 people in 4 months, it's not surprising that happens. where Jewish crimes and atrocities have a magnifying glass applied to them, and it's on display for the whole world to watch. I don't doubt at all that anti-Jewish sentiment would increase, and that it has indeed increased. What I'm concerned about is why is that such a concern for me as an Australian? Why should I really care about that? They brought it on themselves. So I don't give a fuck. In fact, I think it's a good thing because it's making more people jaywwoke.
Yeah.
And what is wrong with that? What is wrong with that at all?
The level of hysterics and etc. is definitely like making the average person in this country, because they're just being fucking forcefully exposed to it at this point. Like normally this would be like some mission of like us holding up a fucking piece of information to them. No, they're seeing it themselves, which is great.
That's it.
God, you see that Rabbi Shmuley fucking dressing up as like the world's most cartoonish depiction of a Jew and be like, this is the thing that Candace Owens fucking does, blah blah blah. She thinks I like Christian blood. Again, more of that, please. Just fucking go insane. Allow the fucking DNST3 gene to fucking control your entire mind, because you're doing our work for us.
He's that rabbi who like sells dildos and shit, isn't he?
Yes. His daughter sells bugs and dildos and shit, yeah.
Yeah. No, hail Candace Owens. I'll say, like, some of the stuff, she's actually surprisingly smart, I got to say, for a black woman. And some of the owns she's had on the Jews recently has been quite impressive and just downright funny as well, I found.
That's not hard to write fucking material when you're opposing those types of fucking people.
Yeah. Okay, so let's move on to some other stories. So just a few quick ones for you. So the Greens have actually introduced legislation for the government to use divestiture powers. So that is powers to kind of break up a market monopoly or duopoly. In other words, the players that have the most amount of market share. The government can flex its muscles a bit and break that up. Think of like when Microsoft was broken into two parts in America, for example. This was actually, interestingly, something that was proposed by the National Party and Bob Katter. So now the Greens are actually introducing legislation into the lower house. The thing is, though, the Labor Party oppose it. And the reason for it, Albo said, was because, well, we've got a market economy in Australia. We don't have a Soviet-style command economy. Interesting language from someone from the socialist left faction of the Labor Party. But look, even though the Nationals support this, or at least support their own version of it, I can't see the Liberals getting on board with this. There is no way, considering where a lot of their money comes from as well. I just can't see how they would come to support this. What a surprise that Australia's builders have said that Albo's goal of building 1.2 million houses in 5 years is a pipe dream. Apparently, the beginning of that cycle of that 5 years is coming up very soon. And but here's the bit. This is the bit that shits me about the builders, right? They say, okay, if you want to achieve that goal, you need to build 60,000 homes in each quarter of the financial year, and that would require 90,000 more people that currently exist. So do you see the argument that they're making there? We don't have enough people. We don't have enough people to build houses. Even though those people that we bring in would have to live in houses, wouldn't they? So do you see, we were talking about this twisted logic before.
We're coming back to it.
So it's not just fuckwit Labor premiers who say stuff like this. It's the commercial sector as well. The Chamber of Commerce, the bodies representing big builders, are saying we don't have enough workers to build the houses that we need, so therefore we need to import them. What a fucking load of shit. Okay, so the RBA has kept rates on hold. So they're still at 4.35%. We've had 13 rises since May of 2022. And as usual, they're not ruling out any future rises. Not ruling out any future cuts either, but I'd say cuts would be off the table until at least the end of the year. Okay, now Australia's banks are calling on tech giants like Meta and X and Apple to sign up to new mandatory scam codes. Now, this is concerning, as you imagine, scammers, financial scammers that create fake profiles on all of these social media platforms and then scam people out of their money. Australia's big banks have said that they have already imposed self-regulation on the banking sector that is providing protections to their customers. And they're saying that social media is not doing the same thing. So they're calling on them to either sign up to these codes or for the government to just impose them upon them. Now, I know there's obviously an element of self-interest here. I think the banks were they were sick of getting blamed for the scams. Even though that's where your money is held, typically speaking, a scam does not begin with your bank account. It begins on Facebook or
a phone call or something.
Yeah, or a romance scam, like a fake profile on Tinder or something like that. So I get what they're saying.
It needs some form of phishing. There's not too many instances of super hackers hacking into a banking system.
Right. So now there was also a story in the Australian saying that Facebook far and away leads all social media platforms in terms of the amount of scams that are occurring. That doesn't surprise me, considering the amount of fake profiles and dodgy pages and stuff that you've got on Facebook. So while I don't want to defend the banks here, I will say that still sounds like a good idea. Even if this is motivated by self-interest banks, I definitely think we need protections, because pretty much everyone knows someone now who's been a victim of one of these. I can think of 2 people off the top of my head that I know. One of them was tens of thousands of dollars. So it's not Nigerian princes anymore, like I've said a few times before. They're getting sophisticated. People are producing fake profiles that look authentic. They know what to say. They know how to socially engineer a person and persuade them into doing things like handing over bank account details and that kind of thing. And definitely, people kill themselves over shit like this. So yeah, absolutely, we need better controls here. Okay, if you're an aged care worker, you might have gotten another massive pay rise. So I thought that one you guys got of 15% a few months back was very good. I think you deserve it, though. It can be a bitch of a job, and you guys are underpaid, and things got even harder for you during COVID. So you deserved it. But the Health Services Union has just negotiated up to a 28.5% increase in wages for the entire sector. So good.
Right.
Oh yeah. So unions are bringing Qantas to court. Actually, no, the action has already started. So this is in the federal court. Now, this concerns mass sackings that occurred during COVID. So these were, I believe, might have been, it was hundreds, if not thousands of staff were laid off. And they were basically just told, well, this is because of the pandemic. There's obviously not as many flights as there were before. We therefore cannot keep on as many staff. Well, not really, because just about all of those positions were outsourced. In other words, they hired people from overseas as cheap labor to replace them. So it was not actually a case of redundancy because of a decrease in productivity or whatever. It was just an excuse that they used. And that was ruled illegal industrial action by Qantas. So now unions have Qantas in court right now, the federal court, and they're looking for compensation. So, and they're going to get it too, considering it was already deemed illegal. Just be interesting to see how much they get.
Good. Punish them for it. Honestly.
So, still on IR, there was a story on 7:30 a couple of weeks ago on Hungry Panda. We've spoken about them before. Hungry Panda actually had a delivery driver who was killed.
Dude who got flattened on a bike.
Yes. And then Hungry Panda were forced to actually pay out his family because they were found to be liable in his death. That was the first time I'd ever heard of Hungry Panda, because it's basically the Chinese language version of Uber Eats. Yes, we do have that many Chinese people in Australia. So apparently they're still being dodgy. They had a delivery rider who encouraged other delivery riders in the company to take part in a union protest, and to also just kind of lobby their employer for better pay and better conditions at work. Well, once she did that and Hungry Panda found out, all of a sudden her orders just dropped off. She is still technically, it's hard to describe the relationship. Yeah, I mean, yeah, but you got to remember, like on paper, she's still not an employee. She's like an independent
contracted. Yeah.
She's a rugged individualist, of course, inspired by Atlas Shrugged. But no, at the end of the day, you just get the orders that they allocate you. And if you don't have the orders, you're not going to earn as much money. And that's the exact position that she found herself in. And apparently she's not the only one who's found herself in that position. Other workers who have complained about it suddenly see their hours reduced or their orders reduced. And, Hungry Panda is one of those ones that can fly under the radar a little bit because of the fact that it's Chinese language. So, it's just something that's sort of known within the Chinese community in Australia. And dare I say that they're not as concerned with labour rights as white Australians are.
No, like they're not. I don't even think they're concerned with fucking. Oh yeah. Well, it's meant to be a ripoff of that one white actor. They like fucking basically like Chinese up that white actor or some shit like that.
There's like this.
He's not even Chinese.
There's this, like the newer episodes of South Park, they had like the gentrification of South Park, like the Whole Foods moved in and the hipster bars and all that. And the Chinese guy, like his business doesn't do as well anymore because he's competing with them all. And so his new business model is to hire a child labor force so that he can cut his costs. And that's like how he fights back against them.
Oh, Christ.
Okay. Now, still on IR, Uber. So they have actually agreed to pay $271.8 million to Australian taxi and hire car drivers. Now, this is basically compensation to the market loss that they have suffered ever since Uber came into the market, which, when was it, 2014 or so? I think it's something like that. And when Uber first came into the market, you'd have to remember they basically were illegal because it was just an app that was going around that you could use and order a car and then obviously pay the person. But it wasn't subject to any regulation. or anything, at least not for a while. And that's the way it was in many countries. It basically started as something illegal. It worked its way into the market. The government recognized what was going on and decided to regulate it rather than ban it. So given that, I assume anyway, I haven't really looked into the details of all this, but there was a long-standing legal action by taxi companies all around the world, by the way, not just in Australia, against Uber, saying that, they deprived them of their livelihood and they had an unfair advantage because they weren't subject to the same kind of regulations and licensing practices and everything that, a taxi fleet is subjected to. So Uber has basically said, okay, that's true. They don't want any further court action. And they've decided to give out that huge, huge payment. I think that's kind of justified because, yes, it is true that, Uber sort of muscled their way into the market in an underhanded fashion. But at the same time, I'm grateful for Uber for coming in because, holy shit, our taxi services needed a shake-up.
They need a good slap on the ass.
They did. I mean, they had a monopoly and they really exploited that monopoly, I'll never forget, I ordered a maxi taxi. And this is ages ago where we were going out to Northbridge or something. There was a bunch of us. And it didn't turn up. So I called back and I was like, where is it? And they said, one wasn't allocated to you within 20 minutes, so we cancelled it. And I was like, do you tell people when you cancel it? And they said, no. Stuff like that does not happen anymore with Swan taxis because Uber gave them a sufficient kick up the arse. You can't treat customers like that. So, I still am grateful for Uber. Okay, so lastly on industrial relations, the federal government is calling on the Fair Work Commission because they're making a decision on the minimum wage soon. The government is calling on the Fair Work Commission to make that wage increase in line with the inflation rate. The unions, on the other hand, are calling for a 5% increase, which is above the current inflation rate, which I believe is 4.2%. Last time I checked, it was 4.2 anyway. Okay, well, the thing to keep in mind here, that's technically above the current inflation rate. But what has been the average inflation rate for the past year or so? It's probably been about 7%. Okay, it's only just recently dropped. So you've got a lot of time to make up for. You've got a lot of lost wages to make up for. So I don't see that 5% demand to be excessive by any means. If you read the article of The Australian, they definitely make it out to be excessive. But no, I think that's actually quite fair. Okay.
I'm up for abusing companies. I'm completely up for abusing companies.
Yeah, I'm up for wage increases of much more than 5%. Much more.
Oh yeah.
All right, so foreign affairs. Again, some quickies for you. We had the trade minister, Don Farrell, actually said in the Senate a little while ago that the United States is not Australia's most trusted ally. You know who he said is our most important ally? New Zealand. That's an interesting one.
I'm pretty sure not only could we invade them with our tiny little boutique army, but it's completely legal for us to invade them. They're not even a real fucking country.
Not really. They were originally going to be the seventh state of Australia, by the way. That was the original plans for...
Western Australia is more of a real country than fucking New Zealand is.
Yeah. No offense to any New Zealanders who may be listening. But anyway, Simon Birmingham said that Don Farrell now owes the United States an apology. That's one hell of an apology to make. And Peter Dutton seized on these comments as well, saying it was disgraceful and that it beggars belief. Don Farrell was simply just talking about regional affairs, you know. He wasn't really looking at like the big picture, big defense picture, I guess, that the Liberals always want to see it in. So I certainly didn't see it as offensive or anything.
I was going to say, like, if you're like a neoliberal, like geopolitics spurg, like, wouldn't you find that statement completely unoffensive?
Yes, I'd say so.
All right.
Unless you were like Henry Kissinger or something.
Oh, yeah. Yeah.
Okay, so I'm sure we've also all heard about this current spat that exists between Kevin Rudd and Donald Trump. So Kevin Rudd, if you didn't know, is currently the Australian ambassador to America, meaning he's mainly stationed in Washington and New York, I believe. So, you know, some like leaked comments have surfaced of Rudd calling Donald Trump all sorts of nasty names. I believe he said that like he would be a threat to national security, or words to that effect. Rudd has not apologized for them. In fact, there are comments that he's made in print where he's criticized the former president, although perhaps not in as harsh terms as the ones that have been leaked. Trump did an interview with Nigel Farage recently where he said that he had heard Kevin Rudd was not the brightest bulb, and that he's a nasty guy. He heard he's a nasty guy. Well, he's got that part right. And he also said that in the event that he turned out to be hostile, that is, hostile to the White House or to American interests or whatever, he would not last long. That's quite an incredible statement. And George Brandis, who's the current High Commissioner to the UK, he basically cautioned Donald Trump on what he said, because diplomats are basically supposed to be hands off. Then again, diplomats are supposed to engage in political hyperbole either. So, the criticism could run both ways here. But it would be absolutely extraordinary if you had a case of where Donald Trump as US president were to expel Kevin Rudd as a diplomat. Because, remember, they don't appoint them. Australia appoints who the diplomat is, who the ambassador is. But they are in their rights to expel them and say, okay, you're out of the country. But what does that also mean? That means effectively that you're at least temporarily severing diplomatic ties with Australia, which would be absolute. That would be mind blowing if they did that, And it's hard to believe that Trump would do that simply because he had like a personal beef with Kevin Rudd. So I would say that is all bluster from Trump. There is no way he would actually do that. There's no way he would expel an Australian ambassador. All right. So, South Australia's Department for Child Protection, we're talking about Aboriginals now, has apologised to Aboriginal families during an inquiry into the removal of Aboriginal children. Now, this is, as they always say when reports of this comes up, like a modern-day stolen generations. Some say that the stolen generation never actually ended, that the program is still in place, simply based on the fact that, yes, child removals do remain high among Aboriginal families. That'll come as no surprise to anyone who cares to find out what the average Aboriginal family household actually looks like. But anyway, yeah, we've had more of this crap, this time coming from South Australia. And that, what was it? The commissioner said that she has spoken to several mothers whose babies were either removed at birth or were removed slightly after that. What we don't have any commentary on is why they were taken. And this shits me. These reports and ABC and everything, all they ever do is just say They just say two things. They say a lot of babies were taken and they were Aboriginal babies, and that's it. And then, it's up to the reader to fill in the blanks. Now, obviously, I fill them in a very different way, but it infuriates me how they do this time and time again. Just forever with that implication that we're just purposely stealing Aboriginal babies for the purpose of breeding them out, when we are absolutely not doing that at all. If anything, you would be preserving Aboriginal bloodlines by helping them reproduce and then having the state look after their kids in conditions much better.
That aren't going to lead to their fucking death.
Yes. Because I guarantee, because Aboriginal life expectancy is higher in prison, for God's sake.
Yep.
That was
not a lot of people fucking consider that.
Custody Royal Commission found was that you were actually less likely to die as an Aboriginal in prison than you were in the community. Okay. Okay. All right. So in WA, turning to crime now, but still talking about Aborigines, of course. Cleveland Dodd, who was the first ever youth detention death in WA, and still it happened at Casuarina Prison, so we still actually haven't had any deaths at a juvenile detention centre. Nonetheless, he was a 16-year-old who took his own life, or anyway was said to have taken his own life, in the notorious C18, which is basically the unit in Casuarina for the worst of the worst youth offenders. They don't have the capacity to look after them at Banksia Hill, so they send them to Casuarina, where you've got prison officers who carry things like capsicum spray. So apparently there was a prison officer who walked into the cell of Cleveland Dodd where he died and made ghost noises. And apparently other detainees heard that. And now the Department of Justice is assessing that through its Professional Standards Board. Right. Now, okay, fine. That'd be in bad humour, bad taste. But, I mean, is that really such a big deal? Why do we just keep talking about this bloody thing?
Oh, Christ.
Okay.
Well, they have to milk every single fucking ounce out of this. Can I add another thing? Or I'm not sure if I'm seeing in the actual prep, but are we covering the little riot that happened in Alice Springs?
No, I did read about that today, but yeah, you can
I'll give the noticer props and actually doing some decent coverage on this. The noticer, you can find him on Twitter and Telegram under just this big white logo with a black N in the middle. He covered this pretty well. But yeah, no, some Aboriginals were drunk and disorderly in a pub in Alice Springs, were promptly thrown out, only to start trying to break into the pub, smashing some windows, kicking, throwing bricks and rocks, and etc. The police response was basically non-existent, and then they proceeded to riot up Fed Street.
Right. And my understanding is they've imposed a curfew now. That was just imposed? Yeah.
Yes, they posed a curfew, which is being commented on as disproportionately targeting Aboriginal children. You're gonna make them end up in jail. It's just like, are you fucking serious? Are you people so fucking low agency you can't even follow a curfew?
Yes. Yeah.
Also, where are the parents? Why the fuck are they out in the middle of the fucking night?
The parents are out there doing the same stuff the kids are, I think. Most of the time, anyway.
Yeah. If not passed out drunk somewhere.
Yeah. Okay, so the Victorian government, believe it or not, is launching a trial of electronic monitoring bracelets for young offenders. So this is basically one of those things where the government has been forced into doing it because of the rise in youth crime. And there was another report on youth crime on 7:30 a few nights back. I think they focused on Western Sydney. And of course, they were talking about how great all the diversionary programs are, the ones that get kids into playing sport and stuff. And they even have kids at cops talking about how, you're not going to arrest your way out of the problem and all of that. I'm like, yeah, I agree. It's just, what we could do is stop letting in non-whites. And then when it comes to the ones that are actually here, you crack down on them and you lock them up. You want my two-pronged approach, that's what it is right there. You would solve the problem then, or you'd bring it pretty much to zero. And then in New South Wales, there are legal changes that are designed to make it harder for young people to get bail. So remember, they had to basically wind back all the bail reform in Queensland after the spike in youth crime. Well, they're introducing even tougher laws in New South Wales now for the same reasons. That you've got so many kids reoffending when they get out on bail. And basically they interpret as bail, oh, wait, you mean I'm not going to jail? Awesome. I'm just going to go right back to what I was doing before. So obviously you've got to have a stick. Yeah. And that, again, is what a Labor government has been forced into doing. They should have done it long ago. They should have had measures even harsher than what they have right here. But I guess it's good to at least see a little bit of movement there. Okay. So, drugs. Labor is aiming to win Liberal support on harsher laws on vaping. So apparently, the Labor Party is actually fairly united here on cracking down on vaping. Essentially, they wanted to move into a space where it's only if you get a prescription. If you're a smoker who wants to quit smoking, you get a prescription for vaping. I think the ultimate goal is that. And we are kind of moving towards that. So the current proposal is to include up to 7 years jail and $2.2 million of fines for those caught importing and selling illegal vape products. And apparently the Liberal Party is split on this. The Greens are as well. Dare I say that a hell of a lot of Greens voters are vapors at the same time.
Yeah.
So interesting to see how that goes. But yeah, I got to say, this is one of those few occasions I think I do support Labor on this. Now, another thing that I support Labor on is, you know what a NANG is, Nolsey?
Nitrous oxide canister.
Yeah, so the purpose of them is to make things like whipped cream. I think you can use them in cocktails as well. But yeah, it's, compressed nitrous oxide in a small little metal canister. But if you call them a NANG, you would know them for completely different reasons. You inhale them.
Making small teenagers brain dead.
Yes. So what it does, it gives you like a 30-second high. Apparently Winston Churchill was a user of nitrous oxide, as well as being an alcoholic. But yeah, they've been popular among like high school kids, apparently, because up until now anyway, you can just go and buy them. They're completely legal because, as I said, the purpose of them is to make like whipped cream and stuff. They're for food products. And that has meant that, people under 18 were able to go to the shops and just buy mountains of these things called NANGs and then just get really, really fucked up off them. Now, I remember I haven't seen them in a while, but there were pages on Facebook for 24-hour cream charger. That's the other name for them. Cream charger delivery. Okay? Who the fuck would need to be making whipped cream at 3 a.m. and need an urgent delivery of those canisters to their home address? Nonetheless, that existed, okay, because they were legal. So here in WA, they're introducing laws limiting the sales now. And basically what they want to do is make it so that you have to be a licensed, what do you call it? Not bartender, but, someone who distributes alcohol in a pub.
Vendor, or have an RSA or some shit.
Yeah, something like that. You run a pub that sells alcohol. or like a restaurateur. Like you've got to, in other words, you've got to be able to produce some credentials that show you have a legitimate, non, like drug related reason for using these products. Yeah, I say, why didn't you have these laws long ago? Because I remember this was a thing when I was in high school. I was in high school ages ago, right?
Yeah, this one's been around. This one's fucking been around.
For a long time. Like I remember going on school leavers. I don't know if you did leavers in Aussie, but I remember like people were doing these things there.
Yeah, I did leavers. Yeah, mine was very tame in comparison to basically everyone else I knew.
I just got drunk. I didn't really go any further than that. I just went there and got drunk. I can be forgiven. I was 17. But yeah, I just want to know, like, yeah, why didn't we have this 20 years ago? And like, well, why did we at least have Facebook cracking down on these 24-hour delivery services, for Christ's sake?
Before the government fucking did anything. That's odd, and a private company actually doing something of its own volition.
Because it can cause brain damage, and it's even known to do spinal cord injuries, permanent, irreversible injuries to your spinal cord, which, of course, that means it fucks up your movement, considering, that's kind of like the center of where all your movement derives from. So, yeah, there's some really nasty side effects to them.
Yeah.
Oh, so you may not have known this, but there is apparently an ongoing inquiry into systemic racism in the Northern Territory. So this was commissioned 3 years ago by the current Labor government, and it's basically looking at discrepancies in hiring rates of Aboriginal people and incarceration rates. So, of course, given all of those things are much higher, they have disproportionate rates of criminality, for example. Well, that can only mean that there must exist some form of systemic racism, meaning that you simply have to breathe the air, apparently, in Darwin to be a racist. And
it's not like your experience with the fucking natives over there that causes people to do this. That'd be racist to say, wouldn't it? It's not that basically everyone in fucking Darwin has gigantic fences around their property for a very, very specific fucking reason.
That's right, yeah, and it gets even worse like the more remote you go. In other words, where there's more and more Aborigines. So the unit responsible, the Aboriginal Justice Unit, they're the one responsible for carrying out these reviews. And that includes a review of every single government department that exists in the Northern Territory. And apparently after 3 years, they're still going with it. There must be just so much systemic racism for them to uncover.
There's got to be a virus going around. The racism virus.
All right. Now, staying in the Northern Territory, we're talking about gambling here, and this was quite interesting. I really learned something reading this article. Was that apparently the Northern Territory has the most relaxed gambling laws in the country. And that includes things like, for example, in the Northern Territory, it is legal to induce people with vouchers and other promotions to get people in the door to to start gambling. I'm not sure if they've got pokies in Northern Territory. They must do, given that. I know they definitely do in Sydney and Melbourne. But anyway, the gambling lobby is really kvetching because apparently there is new gambling laws on the books for the Northern Territory. And even though these laws...
as it currently stands, they've got the same laws as New South Wales. Licensed pubs, clubs, hotels, and casinos.
Okay, yeah. I thought it must be, considering how relaxed gambling laws are. Here in WA, if you didn't know, we're not allowed to have pokies anywhere except our casino, which, of course, just gives them a monopoly on it, meaning they can rake in a shitload. But anyway. But yeah, in the event that these laws go through, and they may actually remove those exemptions like promotional activities to get new customers, get new gamblers coming in, that would mean they're actually attacking the center of gambling in Australia, because like the physical locations in many cases of these gambling outfits is Darwin, is the Northern Territory. They've chosen to reside there because of those relaxed laws. And now they're going into a real hissy fit because it looks like Labor is actually going to be cracking down on them and removing those exemptions. Good. Even the Liberal Party in Tasmania is fighting back against the pokies now as well. That, can have devastating impacts on people's lives. So I say good.
It's not fucking helping anyone.
Okay. So they have banned gay conversion therapy in New South Wales. So it just passed the upper house with 22 votes in favour and only 4 against. So that was probably like the Christian Democrats or something, who voted against it. So that not only criminalises gay conversion practices in New South Wales, but it also makes it illegal to take a person from New South Wales and then travel outside and subject them to gay conversion therapy in another state or in another country. So in other words, parents who do that to their children, that is actually a criminal offence now. Now,
there we go.
Anyone who's heard me talk about this topic before has probably guessed what I'm going to say here. Just remember that this does not just apply to, the kind of gay conversion therapy that people think, like where they strap electrodes to you or something and give you an electric shock when you see a dick or something like that. I have a hard time believing that form of therapy ever existed. Bob Brown says that he was subjected to it. I've certainly got my doubts there. But that's not all it can simply be a discussion with a psychologist or a pastor or a priest or something about your sexual identity. Not only that, it include a doctor. And not only that, but I know in the case of Victoria anyway, and the ACT, it can include transgenderism as well. Okay, it doesn't just apply to gays. It can be as simple as a discussion with your doctor where your doctor might say, hey, maybe this gender fluid thing that you're going through, it's just a phase. Give it some thought, give it some time, and you might come to a different conclusion later. I don't know if the New South Wales legislation includes that. I'd have to have a look. But I bet it does, because it's probably just mimicking the laws that have been adopted in the ACT in Victoria and Queensland as well, I believe.
And again, why is there such a big focus from gay advocacy groups and etc. on these practices? It's because they work. Literal basic mental health considerations can eliminate a large chunk of fucking homosexuality and the rest of whatever the fuck the rainbow is meant to mean at this day and age. It works.
Yeah, and that means that the LGBT lobby doesn't have as many converts. They want recruits. They want more people to be LGBT. So they've got fresh meat.
They want the mentally damaged.
Yeah. And by the way, there are things out there like what Milo is doing, Milo Yiannopoulos. He's doing what's called reparative therapy.
Oh, God.
Now, look, I don't know if Milo is taking it seriously or not, but there are actual genuine psychological programs out there, and some people say they work. It was started by Joseph Nicolosi, who is now dead, but I believe his son kind of took over from him, and they claim roughly a third of their patients end up non-gay, ex-gay, let's say. I don't know. I know still a lot of people are skeptical about that. I still am a little bit too. But nonetheless, it is out there. At the very least, I would say I don't see the harm in trying it. I don't think that it's going to, say, reinforce resentment in that person's mind because it's telling them, you're gay and you're evil. Because I think that already exists anyway. I think every single person actually has that thought, no matter how much they've been told otherwise. I think every gay person has a feeling that there's something wrong, no matter what.
The internal self-hatred. Yeah.
Yeah. And that sounds nasty, I know, but I honestly think that's what they think.
No, it doesn't take too many buns to fucking get them to show it.
Okay. So, pork barreling apparently is going on here in WA. I'm just zipping through these stories, by the way. These are quite short. So, the Auditor General here in WA found that of the $298 million provided by the state government for community and sport recreation projects between 2020 and 2023, Labor being in power in all of those years, by the way, around only $36 million was properly assessed to be of benefit to the community. The rest of the money was not properly assessed and was said to basically just be, put in there as favors, as what we call pork barreling. I wouldn't be surprised. Now, we remember how the Victorian government announced the cancellation of the Commonwealth Games. They were claiming that there would be a cost blowout of up to $6.9 billion. Now, the Auditor General's office in Victoria has said that that figure of $6.9 billion was overstated and not transparent, and that just generally their comments and projections on cost blowouts of the Commonwealth Games was far-fetched. Interesting, because that was the whole, the whole reason why Labor said it had to be stalled. Makes you wonder if they had any other motive here. What it might it have also just been that it was going to be a disaster? That even if we were able to, say, handle this with a minimum of overspending, that we were just going to be embarrassed somehow, maybe because of the labor force that we've got building the new infrastructure and managing the facilitation of the games. I don't know.
Were we going to Brazil it, like when they had the Olympics and they had to set up like fucking all kinds of like makeshift styrocrete bullshit to actually like get it?
It might have also just been that, Victoria's debt was just reaching such catastrophic levels that they're just looking for anything to cut at the moment. And as a result, they just decided to exaggerate the costs to the public to further justify it.
It's heinous. It's heinous that they duped a rural population to thinking they're actually going to get something only to pull the rug. Conveniently after an election.
Right. Well, I mean, but that's also why they said the cost blowouts were there, because they weren't utilizing the facilities within the CBD and instead were, pushing it to the outer suburbs and that. It wasn't really the regions, it was just sort of out in Melbourne. But yeah, I mean, they did promise all that to those people and then took it away from them, which, not a nice thing to do. Okay, so Tasmanian ALP, of course, you can go and listen to our wrap-up on the Race to Decide we just put out. But Rebecca White, the leader of the Labor Party, has resigned. Even though, she was talking early on about even the possibility of Labor forming a coalition government in Tasmania. Well, that doesn't look like it's going to happen. The Liberals have got more seats, meaning they're the ones going to be invited by the governor to form government. And Rebecca White sees the writing on the wall there. So she's got to go. And the expected leader is Dean Winter, who is understood to be seeking the leadership and is the hot favourite at the moment. I found this story a little amusing. In the Northern Territory, I've got this in the prep as Northern Territory ALP. It should be the Liberal Party. Maybe I just assumed this would happen in the ALP. But no, a notorious domestic violence perpetrator who had been jailed multiple times for breaching domestic violence orders is actually on the staff of the Northern Territory's opposition spokesman for the prevention of domestic violence. So this is Darius Plummer. He's the electoral office for the Country Liberal Party MP, Steve Edgington. He had faced court 27 times in the past 4 years for serious domestic violence-related charges, including multiple counts of contravening a domestic violence order and breach of bail. And this is the guy who's on the board for the prevention of domestic violence. And should I tell people the ethnic background of this man? Well, I'll just say this is the Northern Territory, so you can fill in the blanks there. And by the way, he looks like a full blood as well. I got to stress. Okay. So Andrew Constance has been endorsed by the New South Wales Liberal Party to run in the federal seat of Gilmore. That is currently held by Labor by a margin of 0.2%. That actually makes it the most marginal seat in Australia. So poor old Andrew Constance, who I believe was formerly of state New South Wales fame, was looking for a tilt at federal politics, and he hasn't been able to snag a safe seat. And in fact, they have given him the most marginal seat in Australia. Mind you, with the way Albo and Labor is tracking at the moment, I'd say he's probably going to win it.
We shall see.
So Rowan Ramsey, federal politician, 16 years in the Liberal Party, has announced he is not going to run. And also, I think I mentioned this one before, but Tim Wilson, the former member for Goldstein, yes, heavily Jewish electorate in Victoria, he was ousted by Zoe Daniel. Zoe Daniel was someone who really, really kissed the Jewish ring after, she made some comments that the Jewish lobby did not like. She ended up really pandering to them after that. But Tim Wilson lost the seat to her, and he's going to be fighting for it again at the next federal election. So you might see the return of gay Tim. So the Teals, federal Teals, they've been big on campaign finance reform. In other words, reforming the way in which donations are done. Caps on donations and expenditures, and identifying people once they donate above a certain amount. Well, Don Farrell from the Labor Party has accused them of hypocrisy, because there are currently there is a bill being drafted at the moment by that senator, by Don Farrell, which is going to actually reform electoral donations. That includes a cap on both election donations, but also on candidate expenditure, how much a candidate can actually spend on themselves in a campaign. Now, those reforms would be there to level the playing field so that candidate expenditure could sort of be brought to an equal footing. Well, guess what? The Teals don't like that. So they like the idea of donations cap, but not of an expenditure cap. Dare I say, because they spent a hell of a lot of money on their own campaign, funded by Climate 200. So a bit of hypocrisy coming from the Teals that is completely unexpected. There was a by-election in Dunstan. This was a state South Australian by-election. It was triggered by the resignation of the former Premier Stephen Marshall. And guess what? We actually still don't know who's won it, because it's been that tight, but there was also a large number of pre-polling votes. So that always just makes it harder to count. So it looks like the Liberal Party are going to retain it, though. All right. So quickly on education, the Skills and Training Minister, Brendan O'Connor. Jason Clare is the Education Minister. as putting forward the argument that more than 355,000 Australians have enrolled in fee-free TAFE across Australia in the last year. That beats the Australian government's target of 180,000. Now, apparently this is just a lot of people just transferring courses. They were all just kind of, already at TAFE and then they just transferred. So it's sort of a little bit misleading. And the Liberal Party is also taking credit for their previous program, which was Job Trainer, that was implemented in 2021. And that had a lot more to do with driving the new enrollments. Yeah, I don't know. Bit of truth on both sides, I think. This was an interesting one. Teachers have been instructed to consult Indigenous communities before using artificial intelligence to teach Aboriginal and Islander history and culture. And that is apparently...
Well, who the fuck else is meant to?
Yeah, well, they're saying that is due to AI's perceived bias and inaccuracy concerning First Nations people. So in other words, I mean, look, as we already know, AI like ChatGPT and all that, and all the clones that have kind of come up, try getting that thing to say anything good about white people or white nationalism, or try getting it to say that black nationalism is a form of racism. I tried doing that. Good luck. So it's obvious that whatever bias they're talking about is completely non-existent. And basically all they would want is it to be even more lopsided and want it to side even more with Aboriginal people. Because I bet they're just kind of saying that, like, no, the AI is still not nice enough and still not mean enough against white people. That's the only reason why, they're saying, oh, don't trust the AI. So the federal libs want to introduce a bill making it compulsory for airlines to compensate passengers for delays, cancelled flights, or for other such disturbances. I think that's a great idea because it happens a lot. And I mean, if you're traveling on business and whatever, flight delays can be quite costly to you in the long run.
I mean, time is money, unfortunately, and basically, what is a delay except for losing several more hours? Then you have to go and book in the fucking meeting or change when you're fucking checking into the hotel, which normally has fees, etc. So yeah.
Yeah, definitely. So yeah, absolutely, I would say that. I mean, you're costing people money in the process, so it makes sense that you should compensate them in some way.
Some airlines, they do it by default, but then like it's basically like a company policy. So there's like a billion fucking loopholes you have to qualify for, which means that no one qualifies for it.
Yes, right. Do you reckon we should ban TikTok, Nolsey?
No, I see some really oddly based shit on there from time to time.
Yeah, well, I mean, I think like what this is about, like, by the way, the reason I'm bringing this up is because the Liberal Party, I saw James Patterson talking about this, are advocating the US direction and effectively banning TikTok unless TikTok agrees to, stop data harvesting or whatever spurious allegation they're making against them. Now, is TikTok engaging in data harvesting? Yes.
Yeah.
But please tell me a platform of social media that isn't.
Why the fuck should I care? What the fuck does the Chinese government have to do with me?
Yeah, I mean, what about I can't remember, but that scandal that Meta was involved in, where user data was given to political lobbying groups, for example. Yep. That's only one. There's only one scandal that they've been involved in, and simply because of the fact that the company itself is harvesting data. Like, I'm more concerned about like the data that, say, Meta has just by themselves, their access to that data rather than, the third parties that they may pass it off to later on. But the Liberals are trying to tell us the issue is TikTok passing off that data to the Chinese government, to the CCP, the communists. They want to tell you that's what it's all about. What it's really about, though, is what you said, seeing the occasional based software out there. The fact that there's a lot of influences, for lack of a better term, that are actually like pro-Palestine and that. And in fact, I did see a story on a Jewish content creator on TikTok who said the very reason she started her TikTok was because it was flooded with pro-Palestine propaganda. And she's right.
Yeah, it is. It's one of those things that, like the Chinese government sees, and is the Chinese government promoting it? Yeah. Is there actually like a lot of just raw material out there being posted by like unorganized individuals? Also, yes. The Chinese government does promote that stuff because in their eyes they see it as destabilizing to the media power base in the West. A lot of people have noted that TikTok has a different algorithm depending on what country it's in. Obviously, showing academic achievement, athletic achievement in China, while brain rot and niche political issues in the West.
Yes.
Yeah.
Oh, absolutely.
Cool. Destabilize it.
Okay, so just quickly, the NDIS running out of control. There's been two Labor MPs who spoke anonymously with The Australian, basically saying that it's near impossible to keep the cap on spending unless we kick people off the NDIS. Not a surprise. Anyone who's been following these stories will see that it's been moving in that direction for a long time. And finally, Penny Wong got married. So Penny Wong married her long-term partner, Sophie Allouche. I might be saying that wrong. Allouache. Anyway, they got married in a ceremony in Adelaide Hills on Saturday. They have an 8-year-old and a 12-year-old, both girls, and they met in 2007. So there we go. They chose to adopt children before they chose to get married.
And again, lesbian marriages are like Fisher Price marriages. They're like pretend things. It's like giving your younger brother a controller. Doesn't really mean anything.
Yeah, and whenever I look at a lesbian couple, I always find there's like one butch one and then like one feminine one. In this case, it's definitely Penny Wong who's the butch one. I mean, she just looks like a man sometimes.
Yeah.
Her partner, on the other hand, you wouldn't look at her and go, "Oh, that's a dyke." You wouldn't say that. So that just makes me wonder if Sophie here actually just has some man problems and was convinced that she's bisexual or whatever, when in fact she just had bad experiences with violent men or something.
It's like that one fucking Eminem lyric. It's like, Lindsay, please come back to seeing men. Samantha's a 2. You're practically a 10.
Well, I was never into rap, so I'm not familiar. But, I don't go as far to say that, like, lesbians are a myth. Like, they do exist. They're out there.
And some that mean it.
And all you have to do is look at the really butch ones, like Katie Lang or something, to know that they do exist. But they are rare. There's certainly more gay men than there are lesbians. And there are certainly a lot of women who say that they're lesbian or bisexual who are not. But lesbians still do exist, albeit in a small scale.
Yeah, there's ones that mean it and ones that don't, and normally the ones that mean it, there's a pretty dark reason for the ones for why they mean it.
Yeah, which is why I do genuinely feel sorry for them. And that's why, maybe the gay conversion therapy we were talking about before might actually do you some good. And you could work through those childhood issues that were obviously damaging. That would be a better way of going rather than just to embrace the lifestyle. That's effectively saying embrace everything that the trauma gave you, all the problems, all the hang-ups. Why not try to do something about it instead? Anyway, on that philosophical note, we thank you for listening to what was a little bit of a catch-up episode, plus the new stuff. And have a good Easter, everyone. And we'll see you. You'll probably get a show for us the Friday after the Easter break. So until then, thank you for listening. We'll see you later.